This module is on big data, the management revolution. So, why is big data causing a management revolution? The reality is data is being collected in massive scale these days. So by big data, we're referring to huge volumes in data coming you at rapid velocity, and then the data comes in a variety of formats. And because we're collecting so much data now that storage is much cheaper than in the past, there is no excuse for companies not to utilize data in their management and decision making. Now, when you look at utilizing data and practicing evidence-based management, what we mean is that ultimately it's hard to manage when you're not measuring and you don't know what the results are. So if you don't know if what you're doing within the organization, so let's say throwing an ad out there, is actually driving conversion or increasing sales, then you have no way of understanding the effectiveness. So how do you know if you need to move forward with the ad or scrap the ad? So testing needs to happen in that case. So with big data now, it gives managers the opportunity to implement evidence-based management. And so what that means is all managers come with great experiences. And then now, based on their experiences and ideas, you can validate them with evidence. And so that way you can make the best decision possible. The reality is with any strategy, there are a number of options available. But how do you know which option will optimize or yield the best outcome? And so you're going to utilize data to help you make that decision. And then because there's so much evidence out there, it also makes your managers more knowledgeable. They can discover the data on their own and respond more quickly. There are BI softwares out there that enable them to actually look at results. And then so you can also distribute results to the managers so that way they are informed of what's happening within the organization. So the reality is, as I said earlier, you can't not use data. And that's just not only the fact that the data is available to you, but the reality is data is becoming a competitive advantage. Companies that utilize data well is actually outperforming their competitors in their respective industry. So if you look at what research has shown, not only are these organizations more productive, but they're more profitable overall. Think about some of the big companies out there, like Amazon. That's very effective use in terms of data. Some would say they even overuse data, if you can possibly overuse data. But every part of their organization is focused on looking at evidence to then move the business forward. So what are some of the management challenges? Because certainly data is providing a lot of opportunities, but with opportunities come challenges. And so if we look at from the leadership perspective, right, you can't just let your people run loose with data. You can have misinterpretations. You need to have the right leadership in place that understands how data can be utilized. So that way they can set clear goals and objectives for the various departments and groups. And then people are actually looking at the right questions. And so that's really important. Because how often do we receive reports, results that really do not lead to any decision making? And so that's because they were developed with no clear objectives in mind. So if you go in with specific goals and questions that you're answering that actually adds value to the business, then all the teams are aligned and focused on what needs to be done from the data perspective. Then there's the talent management component. And so in order to build the right team, you need to think about all the skill sets that you'll need. So you'll need the technology team that can do the ETL, data cleaning. You may need statisticians, and then econometricians or people who have skills with modeling. Then you want to display and make the data available to the business through data visualization. And so dashboarding skills. And then you may have also individuals who can conduct experiments. So you need to then look at the pool of talents that you have available, identify whether or not there are any gaps, and then hopefully you will then be able to create the team that's needed by your organization. So there's the talent management component. And then you need to have the right leadership in place as well too, to ensure that you have retention and growth for these analytics talents. Then there's the technology. So you're dealing with big data, massive volumes of data. You need to ensure that you are able to process them quickly and serve up information quickly to your business partners. And then so look at what technologies you have in place. Do you need data mining capabilities or modeling capabilities? And so complementary to the talents, you actually need the right technologies as well too. So it's a matter of figuring out what your current needs are from a data perspective. And then there's the decision-making component. And so where would data be applied in supporting decision-making? You know, operationally, if we're trying to reduce costs and drive a better experience, get rid of some of the bottlenecks that our customers face. And then so how do you then plug that into your business processes? Or you may actually want decision-making during the sales cycle. And then so now you need your sales team involved in terms of asking the right questions and then creating the insights that's valuable to them. So where are you going to implement evidence-based decision-making across your organization? Next, we have company culture. So when you look at analytics practices and evidence-based management, it's a top-down approach. Meaning it's not just a matter of having the right talents. You know, having great data scientists isn't going to help you be successful in terms of data and analytics. You need leadership that can foster a culture in which the analytics functions is an integral part of the organization. They are a strategic function within the organization. And then how do the business partners leverage the talents that are available? And then how do you then shift away from a culture in which evidence-based management is supported? And so that way people come with data and insights instead of making decisions based on intuition, but now it's fact-based. So let's focus more on these management challenge areas more in detail, starting with leadership. So having the right leadership is very important. Having someone who has the expertise on the data side is critical. And then understanding where the value add could be placed in the organization. This individual must not only allow themselves to be challenged by the data, meaning recognize that as a leader, I may not have all the answers, and the data may tell me that my ideas are indeed incorrect. And then so you have to be receptive to changing your thinking based on what you learn from the data. And then you must ask yourself, what is the data telling me? You know, is this insight where I should dig further and then explore more? And are there nuggets being here? Because so much data is noise. And then so to be able to derive valuable insights, right, you need to focus on certain sets of data and filter out the noise. And then the right leadership will also ask various questions. And asking the right questions are important because anyone can go through and analyze data, but you need to ask yourself, in order for the insights to be valid and can lead to good decision making, what are the assumptions that are being made? And then are these assumptions reasonable? And what happens should we learn that the assumptions are false? And then can you test these assumptions? And then are there other alternatives that we can explore? And so the reality is you're always challenging what's being delivered. And you're looking for areas in which faulty assumptions could be made, because when faulty assumptions are made, you're making decisions based on bad results, and that's not an outcome that you want to have. So the next area that we're going to cover is talent acquisition, management, and retention. And these are very, very important because when you're dealing with big data in a sophisticated data organization, you need to have the right talents and skill sets in place. So you need to ask yourself, what's your overall objective? Which teams are you going to be supporting? And then, so do you have the right skill sets in place? Individuals who know how to clean and load the data, and then those who actually can work with BI software, so that way they can develop dashboards and scorecards and present results to business users. They may also need to help support business users in terms of visualizing the data, and then so they have data visualization skills. And then what about conducting experiments? Is that something that you're going to implement within your organization? And do you have people who can actually build models? And so you need to have the expertise in these sort of technical areas, but they also need to have a business sense, because the only way you can ask the right questions and then know where to focus and be able to add value with data is if you have an understanding of the business. And so business skills are equally important. Now, on the business side, if you can find individuals that are well-versed with data and know how to make decisions based on insights that are derived from data, they're great skills to have, because now they can partner effectively with your data organization in order to drive success. And so here's just a quick video that teaches you how to keep autonomy, mastery, purpose, and mentorship when it comes to talents. Okay, so now we're going to pause for a quick question. Okay, so we won't go in too deep on the technology side, but as I said earlier, you do need to have the right technologies in place. Technology that can process, big data, so handle large volumes, fast velocity, and then a variety of data that's coming through. And so whether it's Hadoop or other types of technologies that are out there, you need to make sure that you have the appropriate ones in place. And then machine learning. Is that something that your organization is exploring, along with visualization software like Tableau? And so not only do you have the right technology, you need to also have the personnel to support these technologies. And so figure out whether or not you have those skill sets within your organization. So let's look at the decision-making aspect. What does decision-making need to look like in the big data environment? And so what you need to do is put the right information together with the decisions. So what set of insights do we need in order to lead to the right set of decisions? Asking the right questions. And then so that way you can move the business forward. So you always start with the questions. Then you also need to make sure that people don't try to sort of put the responsibility on someone else. So this notion of not invented here. It needs to be a collaborative process with the business as well as with the data team in order to derive success from data. And then finally, right, don't just look within your organization. Joyce's law states, most of the smartest people work for someone else. So it's this idea that we can learn and benefit from what other organizations are doing. And then they have great talents and applications of big data in other areas. And so if you think about it, leveraging these outside expertise will only make you stronger as an organization. So lastly, we're going to talk about culture. And culture is very important, because you can't go through and derive valuable insights if the business isn't going to put them into practice or utilize the information to make decisions. So what you need to do is, with data, hopefully gone are the days of hippos, so highest paid person's opinions. And so opinions are insufficient. When you have opinions, if you can show evidence that it can actually work, you will be able to gain support from your peers. And so it's not so much about what we think, but what we actually know. Will these ideas work? And then under what certain instances will they not work? And so these are all questions that we can answer with data. So that way we don't prioritize and make investments in ideas that will not work. And then, we have to be willing to set aside our beliefs. And the reality is, know that data can oftentimes prove us wrong. Just because something that we put into practice, let's say in our prior life at a different organization, that worked doesn't mean it will work in the new context. And then there needs to be a culture of continuing to gather facts and utilize facts. And then so before you start to make a decision, ask yourself, can I prioritize based on evidence? Can I determine what's the highest likelihood of success given the options that we have available to us? And then so if you continue to gather facts, it will lead to stronger decision making. And then also be open to experimenting and knowing that you can experiment at a smaller scale and then assess whether or not the results that are observed will replicate at a macro scale. And then so if you continue to conduct experiments, you can quickly and easily toss out ideas that you know for a fact will not work. Okay, so that wraps up this section. And then now let's go to the final question.